really interesting place to work. And I love this for healthcare reform because this is real reform. This is changing the way we do business, changing the way that the patients interact with the providers, and giving them better quality at a lower cost. I mean, it's like a win-win-win-win. It's a win for the patient, it's a win for the hospitals, it's a win for the doctor, it's a win for the taxpayer because it costs less. And I didn't realize, I mean, what a big win I had because we run it out of ECU, and they were doing a great pilot. So they had a pilot going, and they thought, we can expand this pilot, and we're ready to go. And they had the system in place, and they were running out of ECU. I was like, great, because then we could do it right away and help people, right? So I wrote the language, or there was language drafted, and we put it in to try to put in the budget, and like, oh, well, we have to do RFP, and let everyone bid on it, and all this shenanigans, which would get into that bureaucracy, and we're never getting anywhere. It was hard to make it happen, to say, we're going to roll it out at ECU. But I met with the physician there who rolled it out, and there's collaboration with all the folks in the state. It was an effort to bring the stakeholders in to make sure that that was not going to be a problem and that anyone could be a provider hub if they wanted to be of the big institutions that had the folks in place. So they all bought into this concept. And they have been extremely successful. They have 52 hospitals online now, with 88 committed to come online. So they just have to roll them out one at a time, and Wilson is one of them. We have telepsychiatry at the Wilson Hospital. And so if you go there and you're having a crisis or having a problem, then you are connected with one of 5 different areas that have a provider where they can triage and determine what you need. If you need to be admitted to someplace, what kind of facility, or if they can give you better medication and care with the other medical professionals there who aren't qualified to diagnose and treat mental illnesses. And they are saying that they have turned around like 1/3 of the involuntary commit orders, where those people come in and it would have cost us hospital stays because they would have been committed, and they're able to send them home because they can diagnose them and treat them and get them connected in the community. That's huge. And they came to us and they said, we want to expand this into the health centers and into some pediatric and some primary care locations that are using this really effectively. Because, what if you were having some issues, or your child was having some issues, and now when you go there and they can send you down for labs, if you could go to another room and talk to a psychiatrist, and you won't have to, gosh, it's so hard to get appointments anywhere. We're so scarce on resources, and there's also the stigma. So if you don't have to do that and you can get a plan, that we would be getting more care at a lower cost. So this is the real reform, instead of government adding a layer of bureaucracy and cost and calling it reform. And that's what we don't want. So that was really exciting, and it impacts people and their lives. It's really changing folks. In this budget, we were able to add facility-based crisis and behavioral health urgent care centers. So the plan is for our Department of Health and Human Services to come up with a statewide network of behavioral urgent care centers and facility-based crisis, so that there's another place to go besides the emergency room. That if we can bring them in at a lower level when they're in crisis, and unfortunately there's so much work to do to get to that base level of the pyramid and get the resources out there, that when we get these folks is when they're in crisis. So we want to avoid the crisis, but right now that's when they're entering the system. So that's where we need to capture them as we work on building up the lower level services. So if we have a lower level system, then we can send them to facility-based crisis or a 23-hour instead of a hospital, because right now there's a lot of there's lawsuit risk and federal requirements that if you come into an emergency department, it's very difficult to downgrade you to a different level of care if you need to be admitted. But if you come in at the crisis center, then you can maybe have a bed there. And we didn't have any youth facility-based crisis. And we have a very, very bad shortage of beds for inpatient psychiatric hospital beds for youth. And what happened was that there's these little, this is kind of a technical area, I don't have the expertise, but it essentially like a bit that was not turned on. Like a billing code for youth, for facility-based crisis that exists, but we didn't have it on our plan for North Carolina Medicaid. So but we had done all the work to create it, but we didn't have it. So no one's doing it because they can't get paid. There's no way to bill for it. So we turned it on. That's great. And now we can have youth facility-based crisis, which how much better for a youth in crisis to be in a facility than in a hospital. So it's things like that, and there's a lot of work involved. I mean, to make any one thing, it takes so much effort, you know, to do that. So I want you to recognize that it's hard to make changes in the law. And I found that really, really frustrating when I was first up there, and I'm not used to the procedure of the committee and the rules and the order. You know, I worked at IBM for 12 years in sales, and it was about results, and we got paid when we made the sale. So it wasn't about talking. It was about getting things done and solving problems. And they just like talked all the time, and you know, and it went from one committee to another committee. I was like, gosh, you know, we have supermajority. Let's just decide what we want to do and do it. And I had those thoughts, but after a few months in, I changed my opinion, and I realized I got more respect for the system, because I felt like this is a protection for the citizens. Because the more time we spend talking about any change, the more opportunity you have to come up and say, hey, that's not going to work for me, and let me tell you why. Or do you realize, you know, the unintended consequences, or what it's going to take to make that happen? And we have that problem with the federal government where they're just making changes, and stability is really important for business. So if we could just go up there and just do whatever we want, and I mean, you could trust me, but who might else be up there? You know, so you just don't know who's going to be there and what they're going to want to do. So I had more respect for the institution, which was new to me, and the processes that we went through in the committee work, because it protects us as citizens from these sweeping changes until we got to the end of session. And how am I doing on time?
I have no idea, so you're good.
Okay. So I had this interesting thing happen. I don't know how many of you know, one of the more interesting pieces of legislation I passed was to make the whirligig the official state folk art of North Carolina. So when they brought that to us in our caucus meeting and said, we're going to do a state symbol bill, they call it an omnibus bill, so that we don't have to go through the process a lot of different times for these kind of trivial things. So if you have an idea, you know, bring it to Pat, was the one collecting them, and we'll all do it. We'll do it one time. And we're all like, you know, let's make it the elephant, the state animal. You know, we just think this is silly because we're here to work. And, you know, we're serious business here, all of us freshmen. So we thought it was really funny. Well, it turns out that it's school classes that get together and they come up with an idea and they bring it forward. So there's more involved in the process, the learning process, where a classroom would, you know, do the work, and they came up with the shark tooth that they wanted to be the official fossil. And then they track it through and sometimes show up at committee and present it. So there's a little more purpose than just the silliness of it. And then I thought about it, and I thought, well, if we're going to do that, then Wilson can really benefit, because we're doing our whirligigs, and they're world famous, but they're not that well known in the state. So I added it on there, and there were a few other things on there, and no one told us that the Senate doesn't hear state symbol bills. Okay, so they didn't tell us that. They just like, we're going to run them in the House. So is it good enough to just pass it in the House? Well, it doesn't become law then. And I also was amazed at how many people thought, oh, you want us to hear your bill? Like, we would come up with a bill and I'd file it and do this, and like, when are you going to hear it in this committee? Oh, you want to hear it? Yes, I'm not just doing it for the fun. Or it would pass from the House to the Senate, and I have to go to the Senate. It's like, hey, where's my Aiden local bill? Oh, you want us to do something with it? Well, clearly I went through all the effort of committee and the floor to bring it here, but I learned what happens to those bills. And I did have a bill that sat over there, and I said, don't do anything with it. And then I have bills now, and I have a list of some resources I want to give you. And some of my bills have been changed. Like, what happens is, you pass a bill, like I passed the telepsychiatry bill, but then it gets moved to appropriations once it passes committee, and then it gets built into the big budget bill, because money's appropriated. So it doesn't have to do it, nothing else has to happen to it. So if you look it up, it's not going to show up as a separate bill. So you need me to tell you, oh, it got in the budget and we did it. It's not that easy to find, because it's a several hundred-page bill that's the budget. And it doesn't really say it on the website, like you can't really tell what happened to the ideas. So sometimes there'll be a lot of things filed, because also there's confidentiality, where our staff is not allowed to share with anyone else what we're doing. So I might have a great idea, 10 other people might have the same great idea. We're all working on our own bills, and maybe we all file them the same day. We had that with DWI. We had a lot of changes, like 5 different bills got filed. Everyone wanted to do DWI. But we don't hear them all. Then they take them and they take what they like out of them, and they come up with one bill and hear it in committee. So then you could say your policy got done, but maybe not the bill number assigned to you. This would happen to my on the tax reform, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this. This was another big one I worked on, was repealing the estate tax. So we repealed the estate tax in North Carolina, and I filed that bill, and that was my very first bill to file because it's really critical for our farmers. I mean, they're the ones who have estates that they can't pass on like a business can to the next generation, and even small business owners who are family-owned don't have that advantage. So they wind up losing all this stuff in taxes. And the federal laws changed so that it was an increase to us in North Carolina if we didn't change that. So I filed that. I got it through committee. People were nervous about letting a freshman do it, but went very well, and I got it over to the Senate. And then it got rolled into tax reform. So it was sitting over there in the Senate, eligible in the short session, because in the short session all we could work on were things that were budget related or that had made crossover, which went from one chamber to the other last year. No new legislation except for local bills. And so they called me and they said, hey, we're going to take your repeal the estate tax bill and we're going to do a proposed committee substitute. We're going to change it completely. And it's now a license tag bill. And so if you look it up and it says Susan Martin, House Bill 101, I'm the primary sponsor of a license tag bill that I had nothing to do with. And it passed the Senate and we concurred because it was a good idea what they were trying to do. But I will tell you to be careful when you look those things up because they change them. And this is what happened with the whirligig. So I passed the whirligig in the House. After it passed, Wallace Simpson passed away. He got to see it pass. So I was glad about that. Passed the House. And then we can do a resolution honoring him, which we can only do if someone's passed away on the House floor. And I thought, let's bring his family up. We'll do the resolution honoring him in the House. We'll have them there in the gallery. And then we'll bring them over to the Senate and they can pass the bill. This seemed like a good plan, right? So I talked to Buck about it. How are we going to do this? Oh, the Senate never does these things. Go sweet talk Apodaca, who's this big, burly, gorilla, mean guy who runs the Rules Committee in the Senate. Here was my opportunity to work with him. So I went over there and I said, hey, I need your help. This is what I'm trying to do. I need to pass this. He's like, oh, you know, what is it? You know, who are you? What are you trying to do? And I gave him my whole spiel and I said, look, I mean, this is the beginning of the end of session. It was May. The session went longer than we thought even last year. But I was like, I don't want to do it at the end of session when people are trying to really get their work done. I want to do it now. And I want a date because I'm going to invite the family up and just tell me if you're not going to do it so I can set their expectations. But give me a date. And if you're going to do it, do it. And if you're not, I'm going to tell them, Senator Newton couldn't get it together. You know, but I need to know. And he agreed to hear it in the committee and he agreed to do it. But the day before, it still wasn't on the calendar. So I marched up there before session and he was getting ready to preside over the Senate for the first time, which is stand up at the podium and run the show. I marched and I never go in that chamber and I was like, hey, where's my whirligig bill? Because, you know, they're coming tomorrow and you committed to me and I sent you these emails and I said, we're going to do this. And, you know, where he's like, oh, and he, yeah, okay, you know, and he says, well, you go get it heard in committee because it has to be heard in committee before it comes out to the floor. It hasn't been heard yet. It's sitting in rules. So he sends it over to his assistant and he's like, you know, they're not going to hear it. He's going to hear it. So they look at it and the only committee that's going to meet tomorrow morning where they can hear it in committee and then send it to the floor is Health and Human Services. Added to Health and Human Services. So this is the beginning of the end of the session. So they add my bill. So that night I go to my reception and I see my friends who are chairs of Health and Human Services. What are you doing? You know, why are you doing this? So I get to tell them so that they know ahead of time before I'm in committee why I'm doing it, why it's important. It's important for Wilson. I mean, Wallace Simpson is such an important person here. So they roll their eyes like, whatever. But what happened is that the lobbyists and the bloggers saw that this bill got added at the last minute to Health and Human Services. Oh my gosh, what are they doing? They're going to do something to Medicaid. They have some sneaky thing. They're going to give a proposed committee substitute. They haven't told us about. They've given us no warning, and they're going to hear it in committee. Packed committee. I mean, it's out there on the internet. People think, what are they going to do? And I said, it's okay. It's really important to have a hobby. It's good for your health. It's good to have a sense of humor. Give me my whirligig bill. You know, it was exactly the same thing. But I learned so much from that experience. One, I made a good relationship with a really important person in the Senate I wouldn't have done if I didn't do the whirligig. And two, I saw the beginning of the swirl of the legislation that comes in as one thing and then it's something totally different and nobody got to comment on it and then we're going to pass it right out. And that's when I shifted from respecting the process to realizing how much I need to pay attention and see how I can improve it. There's a lot of room to improve that process. And you saw at the end of this last session when we have all these rules in place, and that's important, but there's always a way to get something done. So you can take a bill that's out there and you can change it to this, or this is eligible. So you can follow the rules, but it's not really in the right spirit. Because they said, we can't file something new. We had at the end 3 different bills that were interacting. Like if this passes, then this other bill changed it. But you're looking at one and you're trying to make a decision, and you have to know, if we pass this one, we're going to pass that one, and that one's going to take these components out that we don't like. But it's the end of session, we can't really do a new bill because that's against the rules. Well, maybe we need to change the rules so that all of the relevant things are in one bill. And I mean, they're basically, our staff is basically writing a new bill anyway, because this is to protect staff from having to do so much work that we're introducing things all year long. Because we are, when we do a proposed committee substitute, it's basically a whole new bill. So there's a lot of things, and I'm working with staff now on how can we become better at that. And where you can look online and you can really see either that language was taken and moved somewhere else, what happened to it, or how something originated, because there's just a lot of transparency that's not out there. So that was interesting as well. A few other items of I think interest to you, or we did pass voter ID, which I think will really, really help for the integrity of our ballot, so that's an important piece. We had some good pro-life measures where they've had some restrictions on abortion clinics, and the most important one is that we're not funding abortions through any insurance companies on the exchange or any government-funded insurance policy. And that was really hard, and I got up and made my best speech on the floor on this bill, and it's good because I don't talk that much there because I want people to listen when I do have something to say. And I went after all the Democrats went, and they said how women are going to hate them. We had 4 women, Republicans, who sponsored this bill. And I got up and I said, let's just start with the least controversial thing of all. I'm a woman, as are all the other people who are sponsoring this bill. So it's okay. And I said, and I could not agree more with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that I do not want you telling me what to do. And I don't think it's really a female thing at all. I think it's a human nature thing that we don't want someone making choices for us. I said, this is about my choice not to pay for somebody else's abortion. And it was that, and it was to expand the provider protection so that if you were a healthcare employee, you could choose not to participate in an abortion. And all it protected were physicians and nurses, and we expanded it to any worker. If they chose not to participate, that they would not be fired for that. I said, if you're worried that you're not going to have people, then maybe we do need to look at the whole policy. But this was, I mean, we can't change the federal policy, so we're not taking away anybody's right. All we're doing is giving you the right to say, I don't want to pay for it, or I don't want to do it. If you want, you still have that freedom. So, but they're arguing the issue, a different issue than what the bill actually does. But it was really a positive thing, and I did give a great speech, which you can get online and hear the audio. And because people didn't know where I was going with, it's important to have a choice, and that is the choice, and we want that for you. So we did pro-life. I made some notes because I knew I would forget something. Oh, Second Amendment. We did a lot of Second Amendment things to improve that. And we also, we take a lot of heat for that. And y'all there are groups out there that give us so much pressure, and sometimes you just need to wait because timing is important and how we can get it done and getting the right support at the right time. But we're with you on Second Amendment. And I think those were the main areas that I wanted to talk about. I did bring samples of material that's in my newsletter, which are a summary from the 2013 session and the 2014 session highlighting the budget items. So one handout has all my contact information. This has some background on me, but it's from when I originally ran, but I'm still the same person. I have my palm cards, which I do have new ones, but they didn't arrive today, but still I'm the same. I have a good constituent website, and for those of you who like to read about the issues, I would recommend going to this. It's NC House 8, and here's an article on repealing Common Core, which is another thing we got done. But they write from the conservative perspective of why we're doing the things we're doing, not what you hear in the media, and give you, kind of the counterpoint and the facts about what we're trying to accomplish. So that's a good site. I have ncleg.net is our official General Assembly website, and there it lists all the committees that I'm on. and it will give you the opportunity to go and look at votes. You can look at every vote I've ever taken, and how I voted on amendments, how I voted on bills. If you don't understand, you can ask me why, because sometimes there's a mixture of things, and it's important to vote a certain way. I did bring my example of what it looks like for House Bill 101, which was originally repeal the estate tax and now is special license plate development process. And this documents the dates and where the bill went, like when it went to committee and what happened, but it doesn't say it was law. It just says, sent to appropriations. Or usually it'll say sent to appropriations if it goes in the budget. And this one just got picked up and changed. And so, sometimes you might need help getting through that. And this is all the bills that I introduced and what happened to them, which a lot of them were done and done law. And I had a summary that was part of my newsletter, which I'd love for you to sign up and get my newsletter, because I send them out just every couple weeks, not every day or multiple times a day like some of these annoying ones. Just every once in a while. But you can reply, and I get all of those, and it's helpful to me. And if you tell me what you do and what you care about, then sometimes when things come across my desk, I can call you and say, what do you think about this? I know you're an insurance guy. I'm talking about changing the insurance. What do you think? And I do that with the constituents I know, and I have farmers, and I've built relationships. And for education is an area where I was particularly disappointed in the lobbyists for education. For the business groups, like I represent home builders, it's really clear to understand. It's easy to understand them. You know where they're coming from, or I represent anesthesiologists. You know why it's on the table, so you can listen to their concerns or what's going to happen and know what they're about. But education, it's not that way. It's really fuzzy, and you don't really know. You think they're all about the kids, but they're not. They're really representing some kind of money somewhere else, and they don't really represent the kids. So I was totally disenchanted with all of the education lobbyists. And I think it's way too partisan, and we just need to really do good things for our kids. So it's a tough one. But I started my own teacher advisory council, and all the people who I knew who were teachers, which I know a lot because I've been volunteering in the schools. And last year at the opening of school, I went with the superintendent to visit every school. And it was great because I got all these hugs because I ran into all these people I knew who had moved around to different schools. But I asked them, would you be on my advisory council? And some of them are parents and some are administrators, and just anyone I knew who was a teacher or who had called me with information, emailed me or asked me something about what we're doing in education. And all I would do was give them a little more detailed newsletter that I sent just to that group. Or here's what we're looking at doing for teacher pay. What do you think? Here's the Senate plan. Here's the governor's plan. Here's our plan. Here's the Senate plan. I need your feedback. Tell me what you think about it and what we can do better. And it's so valuable to have that. So I would like to do that in other areas so that I can get a quick response and it doesn't take a lot of time. And I don't use your name and say, so-and-so said, but you can tell me, I'm not sure about that, or this is good. And I can't always fix everything, but at least I know, and I can try to lobby and advocate for you better. So do sign up for my newsletter. I think that those are the main things, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here in this group, and I was here when I first was running, and y'all were very welcome. So thank you. Yes, Virginia.
Yes, I have a question. I'm glad you mentioned Common Core because there's some things going around out there about Common Core. So I'm a little bit mixed up, I guess, because I know that Gene Atkinson has made some statements about it. And this is a quote that was sent to me, so I'm assuming it was a quote that says from Pat McCoy, okay, on North Carolina Spin. And it says, the title of the bill of Common Core says we're eliminating Common Core. If you read the bill, it doesn't eliminate Common Core, it reviews Common Core, and only the State Board of Education with Bill Covey as its chairman can change Common Core. So now how is that?
Well, it's a very difficult area because while we are trying to support the elimination of Common Core, we have to have standards in place. And also, the approach that we had to take to be successful was not to go out and rant and rave and make a big stink about it so that everyone came forward and told us how it was a bad idea. So it was a little bit more subtle where we did a study, we brought in experts, and we heard testimony from all these folks so that we could have heard everything and put it out there that it's a little more of a slow process. Right now, we still have those standards because we don't have different standards to change to, and it's a process. So the process is that this committee is put in place to review the standards but we will not accept the federal standards. North Carolina will decide on the standards. So it is technically possible that they decide that certain pieces of Common Core are age appropriate, and we're going to take those pieces and make them our North Carolina standard. But we appointed who's going to be on that board and have every confidence that if anything, it would be very, very limited and resolve a lot of those issues. So it's not as easy of just saying goodbye and having nothing. We can't operate with nothing. So there's a transitional time during the next year where they're doing that reviewing and that group decide. So it's important to still be paying attention to that, because you'll see that. So I'd say, yes, we're getting there. We're not all the way there. We had some different versions of the bill that were a little bit stronger that we had a hard time getting done that said they may not use anything that's in Common Core. And they kind of, the education community was like, well, you don't want to say that if it's the best thing, which we don't expect it to be, but maybe there's one concept that's good.
Is the
and we
commission
could
in
use it.
place? I mean, the study group, whatever.
I think the study group is in place, but I thought I saw something in the news that said they had not met, but I may be confusing it with something else. But I'd be happy to get the status exactly on where they are, because that's something that should be going on right now.
I had a question about voter ID. When I went through the polls most recently, the sign said that starting in 2016, you're required to bring your license or your ID. And in my estimation, in my not as long lifespan as a lot of people, but as far as I can tell, 2014 is probably the most important election maybe we've ever had. So, to me, it seems like voter ID is more important to start before that. Is there any
Well, I don't disagree with
possibility?
you on that, but no, there is not a possibility because the way we passed it, it is 2016, and it's still in the courts because, we are doing all these terrible things by requiring an ID. And, it's amazing what's been written about our voter ID laws when in reality, a lot of the things that we changed are what's done nationally. Like we eliminated straight party ticket voting. And I think only 15 or 16 states had that anymore. And we went to shorter early voting days, but the same number of hours. So you can go later in the day or early. So however many hours we had the same number of hours, but in a shorter amount of time. So it's more efficient. But in order to meet the federal requirements and to have our law not thrown out, we needed to allow that time to notify people and assist people and say, if you don't have an ID, and we can help you get an ID, we had to be able to go through that process to make it hold up in court and be able to really implement the law. So in concept, I don't disagree with you, but we didn't feel like that it would fly and we would be able to get it passed and kept to do it that way.
What's the big deal with getting the ID? I understand the older people, I understand that, but what's the big idea?
I work at Hope Station a couple times a month. To get food, you have to have a photo ID. We have every walk of life come through there. Everybody has a photo ID, even the homeless find somehow to get their picture on a government-issued ID. I don't buy the argument that it's going to deny
I
anybody.
completely agree with you, but if you would have to, just learn to sing a song in your head during, listen to the hour-long debates when we're there at midnight about how horrible it is. Because I agree, and if there are people who don't have an ID, how great is this going to be for them? Because we are going to drive them someplace and get them an ID, and then they will be able to get free food and function in society. Because, if that's the case, they must really be looking hard to find these folks and bust them in. And so I think it will benefit these people to have an ID. And so I don't know, and I am totally on your side, but there's a big group that's completely opposed and thinks that the law is ludicrous. But I think we'll see some results. And there will be efforts during 2014 to move towards that and educate people, and hopefully that will even have some impact on the elections.
Well, if we lose each house, if we lose the Senate, go away, and
So please help us get out there and vote. And I am supporting Tom Tillis, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. He's coming to stay with me tomorrow and doing a fundraiser in Wilson, and he'll be in Wilson on Saturday at Amy Jo's for breakfast at 8 a.m. and at Parker's at noon for lunch. It's open if you want to go ask him questions. That will be on Saturday. It was in the paper today, I believe.
That's this coming Saturday?
This Saturday. He's coming to Wilson and take your questions and things. So, anything else? I guess I'm over time.